Good day. Welcome to another edition of my channel. Before I start today, I want to urge you, if you have been watching me and following me, and you're one of the few people who at this point are hearing my message, please subscribe, share, and comment, like and share. All this helps the algorithm to make the channel grow. Today, I want to talk about the very successful visit of President Trump to the Middle East. Between May 13th and May 16th, President Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States, undertook his first major international trip of his second term. He visited Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. It's very telling that in this second term, President Trump will be visiting the Middle East as he had done even in his first term. It shows that there are some serious changes in geopolitical alignments because prior to now, most American presidents always used to make Europe, particularly Britain, UK, the first port of call of their term. If not UK, even the Middle East, Europe. But something very significant happened. Donald Trump not only visited three key countries in the Middle East, he skipped visiting another powerful ally of America, Israel. You would ask, why did Donald Trump in this particular time make Middle East is his first port of call of his presidency? The reasons are not too far away from geopolitical realities. It may also be not far away from the present economic challenges that America is facing. President Trump's visit led to some very significant wins for America. In this visit, Saudi Arabia secured a commitment of $600 billion from Saudi Arabia. And most of the deals were focused on defense, artificial intelligence, and infrastructure. In the United Arab Emirates, the UAE affirmed that they will invest 1.4 trillion in the US over the next 10 years. Additionally, the US has agreed a five-fold increase in the number of AI chips sold to the UAE. That's a win for UAE. Qatar too also signed, said they will promote economic investments in America to the tune of 1.3 trillion, 2 trillion. And they did something very significant. They bought 210 Boeing 787 to Dreamliners for their and 777 planes for their very successful Qatar Air. If you ask me, these are short-term wins despite the size and large volumes of dollars involved, and the material gains involved, especially the defense deals and all. I will say this was not the main reason Donald Trump went to America, to the Middle East. The last presidency of Joe Biden was one that did very serious damage to American-Middle East relationships. It did not only did a lot of damage, it did a lot of damage to the military and economic realities in America. It undermined the biggest strength of America. The biggest strength of America is not America's military might. I have said, and I will continue to restate, it is America's access to the dollar. The dollar is the America's biggest asset. It is the reserve currency of the world, and it is one resource that almost until recently, it was almost an infinite source of dollars of ability. America had an infinite ability to attract buyers to its currency. It printed its own currency in its local as a local currency, but the world bought it as a reserve currency for trade. They used it for so many things. They also used it as an investment vehicle. They used it as a security vehicle. It meant so much to the world. And always, for almost 20, 30 years, there was a limitless amount of buyers of American bonds and American treasuries and American paper, countries who would always make sure that America had an excess of, of resource and capital. But that is no more. That has really changed in recent times. In starting in sanctioning Ukraine, Russia during the Ukraine-Russia war, and not just sanctioning them, taking them off SWIFT and seizing almost $300 million of Russian sovereign wealth, it signaled something very, very dangerous to most other people who park their monies in American banks and Western banks. It signaled that the dollar system can always be used against you. They weaponized that same access to the dollar. Countries like Venezuela, Iran, Afghanistan had been sanctioned severally, even Libya. But in sanctioning a peer competitor like Russia, a very big country with extensive reserves in Europe, it signaled also to a lot of the people who invest in American treasuries and bonds that this can always happen to them. And one of the biggest countries that always do this investment in America, countries that have a surplus, usually the Middle Eastern countries always have a surplus. Russia had a surplus because of its extensive oil reserves, and China because of its trade. There was always a one last year. China had a $1 trillion in surplus. Usually, it would have been an easy thing for them to buy bonds, but China is no more buying bonds, American bonds, in the way it used to. The Japanese also have slowed down buying American bonds. The signal of what happened to Russia was very telling. The countries that have, the Middle Eastern countries as a group, have changed in their orientation. They have changed both philosophically and ideologically and economically. I say this because I've lived in the Middle East in recent times, and if you've lived in the Middle East from 15 years ago, Dubai started this transformation where the Middle Eastern UAE, Abu Dhabi Investment Fund, they started to use their money for their own wealth. They created investment funds and they created sovereign wealth funds that has grown in large numbers. I think the Abu Dhabi fund is almost $1 trillion in holding now they have. And they use it in stimulating their own local economies, building out skyscrapers, investing in tourism, investing in themselves in a manner that means that investment is never ending in the Middle East these days. Qatar just hosted the World Cup, a small country of barely 300,000 people hosting the whole world in that space. So Middle Eastern money has been for Middle Eastern people recently. And when Saudi Arabia, a long-term reliable ally of the Middle East, also started holding back because of the antagonism of the Biden administration towards MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, it weakened that spigot of cash flow that always was available to America started to slow down. So if you ask me, my belief is that Donald Trump went to the Middle East to beg. He went to beg because recently he initiated a very devastating um, how will I call it, a tariff war. And that tariff war was not in the best interest of America because it left America vulnerable when the Chinese stood against its tariffs, and they stood against its tariff and challenged his tariffs. And when they did that, they stood against all those big tariffs he put on them, 140% tariffs ultimately that he put on them. The Chinese put 125. No country had stood up against America in recent times. While Donald Trump was saying all the other countries were coming to um, kiss his ass, the Chinese stood firm and they had to renegotiate. The tariff war initiated by Donald Trump was very devastating to the American dollar. He had to call it off so fast because bond yields were going up. Countries, ultimately, it was discovered that it was Japan was letting go of a lot of their holdings. And when they were doing this, it created panic, and Donald Trump had to call off the trade war. He had to extend it because the bond yields were going up at a rate that was meaning that if America was borrowing, they were paying a higher interest rate for their debt. I have been saying here that over the past few years, China particularly, not by any design, not by a nefarious design of theirs, but in an attempt to try to get themselves out of the dollar trading system, they've been having bilateral relationships with a lot of countries through a mechanism called the currency swap. Through the Chinese currency swap with different countries, they themselves to trade in local currencies. And if you know that China is the leading trading partner of over 128 countries in the world, and and Chinese exports and trade is in the value of almost $5 trillion. That's a lot of money that is outside the dollar system. So slowly, the Chinese have been chipping away at the dollar system, and the Russians and all those countries that have been sanctioned have practically been blocked from being part of the dollar system willingly by the Americans. And with the antagonistic policies of Biden, particularly to Saudi Arabia, and with what has happened in recent times in the Middle East as regards to the Gaza war, the conflict in Lebanon, and the conflict that always involved um, Israel, the Middle Eastern monarchs have banded together and looked out for themselves. Investment flows to America was reducing, especially as regards to financial flows, and that was a very serious case in point. I want to share this document here where I will point out the value of the um, of the dollar, the decline of the dollar. It's been steep. It's been steep, and it's frightening. The dollar has been losing value to a large extent recently, but it has America is a country that runs on a policy it calls a strong dollar policy. To a large extent, America relies heavily on a strong dollar for its transactions so that it can always have access to finance. And so the strong dollar policy is what dictates American imports because America is a deficit country to a large extent and they are an importing country and they want their dollar to be strong, to have strength. So for a long time, many people will say China is a currency manipulating country. America also is a currency manipulating country. If its currency is losing value, it will fight it by way of inflation. It will fight it with all the monetary policies and mechanisms available to the Federal Reserve so that it will continue to have strength in its dollar. It is that weapon of the dollar that they use in making sure that countries that import goods, they import goods from, will always have the shorter end of the stick. Their goods will always be cheap in America, and that's why consumer goods are very cheap in America. America runs a strong dollar policy. And when you undermine America's dollar, because America is, even though they are a big exporting country, they export specialized goods where you cannot go to or get them from somewhere else. Goods like Boeing, goods like artificial intelligence chips, goods like so this or Starlink or the value that Facebook brings or the value that Google brings. These are the things that they export. Starbucks, those kind of values and all, but not commodities that people buy and not that. So when being that they're a very big importing country, they need their dollar to be strong. It has always been that way. I bet in the past few years, the dollar has been undergoing some serious problems and it has been undermined. And this is the reason that Trump made this big trip to Saudi Arabia and the Middle East to go and plead with Middle Eastern leaders to increase their investments in American paper and American bonds. This is not all the obvious thing that is out there. The obvious one is that planes were bought, the military hardware was bought, because still it's very important that American manufacturing is so specialist these days. They move it up the value chain. And if the Chinese come and start selling arms, that's knocking off one major part of American manufacturing. And that wasn't good enough. But it was not for the arms that Donald Trump went there for. It was mainly for the financial assistance that he needs by way of investments in American treasuries and bonds and American paper. And when the sovereign wealth funds of these Middle Eastern countries now saw the desperation in Trump, they leveraged on that and started asking for theirs. Contrary to what everybody expected, Donald Trump made a big commitment to remove sanctions from Syria. They asked from him that this is what they want. People ask, what do they get in return? We should remember that the Middle Eastern monarchs are all protected by the American government. The concept of the petrodollar was that the Saudi House of Saud will be protected and the Saudis will continue to buy, they will sell their oil in dollars. That was the main strength of the American dollar, the petrodollar. It was initiated by Nixon, and it is for that reason I always say that Nixon is one of the greatest presidents America had, despite all the historical attempts to paint him bad. And the protection that America gives to these Middle Eastern monarchs can be reflected in the fact that some of the largest military bases in the whole of the world, American military bases, are in places like Qatar and Bahrain. Some bases in the Middle East are very big. They project power and they project the strength of America's support for those monarchies. Don't forget, these are tiny, small monarchies made up of kings, princes, and they hold on to power through America's protection. So, but beyond that also, I mean, they've got something very powerful. For the past few years, the Middle Eastern countries have been forward-looking since they got a bug of development planted by the UAE cities of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, not Shenzhen and all. It changed. It changed the way the Middle Easterns saw themselves and viewed themselves. They are now focused on turning their economies around from being oil-driven to being aligned with modern day realities. So they are all trying to protect against when the oil will stop flowing. We should remember that UAE is not particularly rich in oil, but they've leveraged on the oil they had to become a big tourist hub, to become a financial hub, and to become so much. So they are looking at a post-oil economy. And that's one of the main visions of Vision 2030 by the Saudis. That's why they bid for things like the World Cup. They see themselves, they bring Formula One, they bring sports, they bring world leading institutions to their country, because this is how they see themselves now. They have seen and tested development. They've seen the benefit of it. And on the hand, one conflict is no more a desire of any of these countries. And it is always better for them to have conflict, reduce conflict, or any source of conflict. And that's why they are now leveraging on their relationship with Trump to ask for de-escalation of the tensions between Israel and Iran. The rhetoric that Iran will be bombed, Iran will be bombed. Iran has something it always threatens the Middle Eastern countries with. It will bomb them back. It will bomb the oil refineries in any country that gives, from which they believe American arms is coming their way. And that's almost all the countries of the Middle East, because America has big, extensive bases in all countries there. And that threat of conflict will mean that it will set most of these countries back by many, many years. By many years, it will set them back, and they just don't want that. They don't want conflict between America and Iran on one hand, or Iran and Israel on another hand. So in one uncanny way, they've become influencers of American policy. This time, not to say, come fight for us. This time it is like, please, let's de-escalate and let's find economic opportunities for growth. The Abraham Accord that was one of the main motives of Trump too. He wants to try and make relationships between Israel and the Middle Eastern countries to be normalized. But in this case also, they have one other thing they are now asking very, very, very aggressively from Trump. Please recognize Palestine. Please don't allow the Israelis to destroy Palestine, and let them have a place to let them solve this Palestine monarch. So on the basis of this relationship, they are now strengthening their request for intervention in the conflict between Gaza and Israel, Hamas and Israel in Gaza. And these are the benefits of their power and their leverage. So while Trump comes to say, please invest in our economy, he gets a $1.2 trillion commitment from Qatar, a $1.4 trillion commitment from UAE. He gets an investment of $600 billion from Saudi Arabia in commitment. They also have asked of him of some things. And his demeanor and his utterances were more measured, more friendly, not bellicose. Even when he was threatening Iran, he was reaching out and he was repeating the refrain, I do not want war. I do not want conflict. I'm a man, I'd rather go by peace. So he is influencing the Middle Eastern leaders, and the Middle Eastern leaders are influencing him. And this desperate dash to the Middle East is by no means a dash to go and sell arms. It was a dash to go and save the dollar. They need the countries that have the surplus on which America has fed fat on through excess cash flow, on which America has leveraged on and been able to raise the debt ceiling to $35 billion, and they are even considering still raising that debt ceiling. In the midst of all the things that Trump tries and plans to do, he needs to sell bonds. He needs to raise the debt ceiling. Scott Bessent is already talking about raising the debt ceiling. And if you raise this debt ceiling, and the countries of the world that always used to buy your debt don't buy it anymore. If the Sovereign Wealth Fund of UAE with all its $1 trillion doesn't buy, if the Saudis don't buy, that means yields will just go up. In fact, it will fall flat. So many of these yields, many of them will not be able to, they won't sell it. That will be a big rebuke on American power and strength and the power of the dollar. Once America was able to attract capital, now capital is shying away from America. So Donald Trump lay there to say, please, 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 can you people come and buy some of our debt? He needs to raise the debt ceiling. Don't let anybody deceive you. Donald Trump went to the Middle East to beg. That is what he went to do, to beg to save the dollar. This is how I see the world. I see the world from different way of looking at life at the lens of geopolitics, and I will continue to bring out more in my videos. I'll urge you to subscribe to my channel, help the channel grow, share the video, make comments if you agree or disagree. Most importantly, if you disagree and you want to discuss some insights that I may have missed, or some insights that will benefit those watching this video. So share, like, and help us grow. Subscribe. Thank you for being with me to this point. This is my video for today. Thank you very much.